All right, so tonight we're going to talk about continuous integration. I really can't talk from the corner. Hold on a second. No. Can people hear me without the microphone? Okay, great. So tonight we're going to talk about Atlassian Bamboo, and we're going to talk about continuous integration, and we're going to talk about Node.js, and we're going to talk about a whole lot of other stuff that didn't really have room in there. So you'll excuse me, and you'll just be surprised as it comes up. How many people here, I missed the hand-ups before, how many people have used Bamboo, or are using Bamboo? Okay, how many people are familiar with continuous integration? Well, a lot of you. Continuous deployment. Agile. Nice. Nice, okay. And Holly's on the phone, so we'll ask this one. How many people use products that are not Bamboo for like Hudson or Jenkins or other? Yeah. Okay, well, you're allowed. So today we're going to talk about, we said what we're going to talk about tonight. Before we start, something that I do with It's Good Consulting is I tend to work a lot with software and team development and personal development. So before we get started, we're going to take 60 seconds and we're going to try an experiment for people who haven't tried this before. And we're going to do a quick meditation/breathing exercise. And the purpose of this is that when you get out of the 60 seconds, you'll hopefully be a lot more attentive. You'll actually hear what I'm saying for the next 40 minutes, and maybe you'll even feel a little bit better. So you're on the honor code. Everyone who wants is invited to close their eyes. People who don't want can leave their eyes open. I won't be watching, promise. Okay, we're going to take a deep breath. Count to 3. And breathe out. Nothing funny, just breathing. Breathe in. Hold it, and breathe out. 3 more times. Breathe in. All the way in. And breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe in all the way, fill up your lungs. And breathe out slowly. One last time. Breathe in. And breathe out. All right, you can all open your eyes. How do you feel? Better. You see how calm you are now? All right, so let's get started. Introduction. We have a project, most likely a software project. We have already assumed to have been written tests. They could be regression tests, they could be unit tests, they could be behavioral tests, but there's some sort of set of software-driven tests that you have written. Okay, and for the intents of this lecture, we're going to assume that you wrote the tests in Node.js and that you're using Mocha as your test framework. And we'd love to get continuous integration working with Bamboo. So what do I do next? Before we get ahead of ourselves, not everyone raised their hands when I was talking about Bamboo and continuous integration and continuous deployment. So continuous integration is a practice of constantly testing your code, cycling, and every time you make a change, you automatically test it and you make sure that it's passing all the regression tests that you wrote. That way you know that you don't introduce bugs by accident. And it was originally part of the extreme programming principles. And in the last few years, especially with the emergence of DevOps and automated deployments, continuous integration has kind of expanded to continuous deployment, which is the practice of constantly pushing the latest and greatest source code out to your customers, either via a software build with some update, or for people who are working with the web, you're just constantly upgrading the production web code with the latest and greatest. And that way you're able to get new features out to your customers and get feedback back from your customers as soon as possible. So Atlassian Bamboo was originally designed for continuous integration. I'm sorry, I have to read half of this off of the slides just because I lost my presenter view here. So Bamboo was originally designed for continuous integration, and in the last 6 months, I think, or so, has included continuous deployment features. Play at home. Okay, so for people who are looking at the slide deck later, there's going to be a link to slides at the end. I actually set up a stack for you, so if you go and follow these instructions and download Git, VirtualBox, and Vagrant, you will be able to set up all the software and all the code that I'm using for this presentation, and you could just kind of tinker with it later, play with the Bamboo side, play with the Node side, and do whatever you want. Right, bring up the local environment. Once you've installed the prereqs on the previous slide, this is what you're going to do. And when you finish those two Vagrant up commands, you're actually going to have two virtual machines running inside of your PC on VirtualBox. One will be running Atlassian Bamboo, and one will be set up with Node.js and the sample project that I created for the presentation. Okay. The other prerequisite that we're going to need to know how to do in general is, let's say we actually have Node and we're interested in doing this in a production environment or some real work environment by you guys. So what do you need to do? The Node.js plugin is included in the VirtualBox image. For people using the previous two slides to download it, it's going to come pre-installed. Bamboo Node.js plugin. So this was actually a surprise. Just 2 days ago, the developer Atlassian, who's in charge of the Node.js plugin, actually merged the source in for the tests for Node.js. For the past 6 months, there's been code floating around that I worked on a lot. But you had to actually go to some special URL and download it manually. And those days are over. You install it like any normal Bamboo plugin, and it's going to work out of the box. And you have instructions for how to set up the Mocha side, the Node.js side, at the URL on the screen. All right, enough talking. Let's get to stuff that we can actually look at, see, and hopefully understand a bit better. So we're going to talk about continuous integration now. We want to test from Node. So I actually, we're going to go into actually looking at this together mode. And we're going to look at the code. This is we have code written in Node.js. The first thing that we normally want to do if we're a software development team is before we start adding it to Bamboo or to any other sort of continuous integration server, we actually want to know how do we run the tests on our own. And when this comes up, no? No. Okay. If it pops up, we'll take a look at it. If not, I came prepared. What we're going to do is we're going to run npm tests. Are people here familiar with Node.js? Because I realize I'm stuttering a lot because I'm not sure how familiar you guys are. Raise your hands, people who know Node.js. Right. Okay. So, package managers. Do people know what package managers are, like apt or yum or yeah? Yeah. Okay. So npm is Node.js's package manager plus. It does a whole lot of other things. So when we do npm test, what it's actually going to do is it's going to read the node make file, and it's going to run the test script that we have set up. In this case, the test script was set up ready to run with Bamboo, and here we have a little terminal window, so we can see how this would actually work. Hopefully it'll sound more like English and less than Greek. Okay, we're going to do something like that, and Node is going to go run our test, and we get a little green light saying one test worked. Now, it's nice to see that we have something working, but we'd also like to see. Wait, before we see what we have, let's actually run it. What we have here is we have a web service that I built that just takes a string and it reverses it. And it looks something like this. Okay, I have it set up on localhost 8080, reversed, hello. And if I go to that, it'll say, ole. Ole! And the source code, you guys, anyone who wants to learn Node and actually tinker with it is welcome to do it. I see a lot of eyes glazing over, so I'm gonna kind of jump ahead here and get to hopefully things that will interest people more. Okay, so we saw something actually work. We saw actually some web service. How does that actually, what are we actually running there in the background? So we understand when we look at the next slide in Bamboo, what we're looking at. We have a test written in Mocha. This is written in behavioral tests style. So we're describing some URL, get reverse, and we have a test saying that it should reverse a string. And to test that, we're going to get, HTTP get, reverse hello, and we're going to expect a content type of text plain, and we're going to expect it to say 200 and say ole. Now, what if something was broken? You know, it's all nice and good when tests work, but if tests passed all the time, then we wouldn't need things like continuous integration, because we'd all just be great coders and tests would never fail. But in the real world, you know, people who aren't quite as cool have tests that do fail, and they fail a lot. So let's see what this would look like had something failed. All right? And we'll do this again live just so you could see the syntax coloring. So if I do git check at example 2, no, it's not going to let me do it. All right, so you're going to have to look at it in black and white. In black and white, if it fails, you'll get the number of the test here, test 1, and you'll get the error saying why it failed. And you know you could consider this gobbledygook the incoming message thing for the point of this demonstration. It doesn't really matter what I did to the code to make it fail. The point is it failed. It told us which test failed. It gave us the entire description of the test from the last slide. So that we have some understanding of where in the code, where in the test suite something failed, and we have the failure message. Okay, that's the Node side. Now we want to see the Bamboo side. So I've actually set up a Bamboo server here. How am I in time, Daniel? Yeah? Okay. I said let's actually do this together. That way people will hopefully go home and actually be able to set up a Bamboo and get moving. This is a clean instance of Bamboo set up with the two demo servers, the two virtual boxes that I said that I actually made using the commands that I showed you. So everything should work nicely for you guys afterwards. The only thing I did so far was I went to my.atlassian.com and I got an evaluation license, which I set up. And I'm just going to take defaults and defaults, external, MySQL. I think this is Bamboo for people who want to do this later. Okay, and Bamboo's gonna install with a fresh install, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna go and we're gonna set up that same test that I showed you from the command line, and we're gonna see how that gets done in Bamboo. I'm going to give it another 10 seconds before I give up. And then you're going to have to go back to trusting me that the slides show you enough useful information. All right, we're back to slides. So this is the risk in doing in coding live during the presentation. Sometimes it works and it's great, and sometimes. Okay, so we're gonna, had we had Bamboo live, what I would then do would, I would go set up a new project in Bamboo, a new plan, as it's called. I'd set up the source of the plan. In Bamboo, you need to give it the source of the code that you want to work with, and you have to give it a set of tasks to explain how to build, which could be compiling if you're in C or Java or C# or any other compiled language, and it could be a set of tests, and it could be setting up jars. There are a lot of things that you might want to do, and the goal is at the end of the plan to have deployable binary or a testable and deployable binary that you can work with, and then you're going to run the unit tests and get the test results. And then Bamboo's going to tell you after every single set of tests, it's going to run, it's going to recompile, it's going to retest, and it's going to tell you if things worked or not. All right. All right, so let's set up a quick admin account. Admin. Seriously? Seriously? All right, let's go to the next slide. Maybe it'll finish by the time we do that.
Get a Mac.
Huh?
Get a Mac.
Get a Mac next time? No, it's VirtualBox. It's VirtualBox.
So no Windows updates.
Huh?
So no Windows updates.
No Windows update. So I have one screenshot for you guys until and unless Bamboo comes back, which is what it would look like. I opted to give you guys a screenshot of what a failure would look like, because if things go, if everything goes well, we're not really interested in this tool. We want to see how the failures go. So what we see here is we have the build summary. We have a customer vision, which I used to do the test, because what was the most up-to-date code, what's on master for people who are familiar with Git terminology, everything was passing. So I had to go back in time to a revision that I set up in advance that would fail. So this is the revision that we ran. We see that we have one failure. We see the code commits that came in this revision, and we see the test failure, which should be familiar from us from the last slide. So continuous integration. So Bamboo has something called triggers. A trigger is what is going to make Bamboo decide that it's going to go through a full cycle of checking out the source code and running the build and running the tests. And there are a number of types of triggers that you could have set up to make your life easier. The most popular triggers are either pulling Git or Subversion. I wrote Git because a lot of people are using Git, but this still works with Subversion. This even works with CVS and whatever you want. So you could pull the source code controlled repository, and what will happen there is Bamboo will just keep checking the tips of all the trees every 5 minutes or so, and when it sees a bunch of changes, it'll pull the changes and it'll start running. You could push to Bamboo through a webhook if you use Stash, or if you use GitHub, or if you use most other popular Git server frameworks that come with webhooks. You could set Bamboo and your Git server up so that the Git server will tell Bamboo every time something's happened, and that'll happen kind of more in real time. And you could use a time build for projects that want a daily build of all their software. You could set that up. And you could actually set up different building and testing scenarios using different triggers. For example, if you have if every time you commit, you might want to only run a quick subset of the tests, but once a day you might want to take some massive test suite that's going to take an hour or two to run and do that daily. And you also have a manual trigger. You could just go in through the user interface. Anyone with access can go in and click run, and it'll go do a manual build. And you could use successful builds. Remember before I said that the whole point of what we were doing in this plan was to come up with some binary that can be tested and deployed. So we can use actually successful builds to trigger deployments, which is what I'm going to get to next in continuous deployment. So deployment has been added as an option to Bamboo since Bamboo 5, which to the best of my knowledge came out sometime this summer. There's intuitive and informative UI, so it's really easy for people to see. I don't know how well you could see the screenshot. I can't see the screenshot. Well, you have one over here. What you have with in the UI is you have a bunch of environments. An environment could be your QA environment, your development environment, your production environment, and you can see what version of the software that had just come through Bamboo and built properly and tested properly is in each environment, and you could see where from in source control that came from. And this is all semi-new features. It's been around, like I said, since the summer. And you can mark or release as approved or rejected to kind of give the rest of your team some oversight into what's deployed where and whether things are looking good or whether there's a possible problem. And so how does this work? So taking a step back from Bamboo for a minute, in today's world of automated deployments, and I'm sure Evgeny's going to talk a little bit more about this. No? Maybe? All right, so it's good that I'm doing it. There are two real models for deploying code to your production environment, especially if you're doing things automated, but the truth is it applies even if you're doing things manual. The first way is you could deploy everything through source code control tags. And what that means is that you're going to decide that your code is ready for release, and you're going to tag it using Git or Subversion or whatever, and then you're going to instruct your deployment environment to go update the code and take the running code from this named tag and use that to update the production environment. And the problems with Bamboo with this approach are twofold. First of all, Bamboo can't mark a tag as a release. Bamboo can only mark an artifact, which is that set of files that it created with a plan as a release, as something that's releasable. And the other problem is that your Git repository needs to not be behind a firewall from your production server. So you could set up firewall holes, but in general, your production servers need to have access to your source code control repository in order for this to work. So if that doesn't work, we could deploy via an artifact. This is how Bamboo is set up to work today, and it's actually generally going to be required if you're working with a compiled language, where there might be a difference between what's in source control and what's actually being deployed on your application server. And even in non-compiled languages like JavaScript or Perl or Ruby, you might want to have local requirements or prerequisites like modules or whatnot that need to be bundled at specific versions with your code. So even in the case of non-compiled languages, there's a strong case for deploying via artifacts. And what you do here there are actually three ways of working. The first is artifact push. And what you can do there is once you've compiled and built and you're ready to deploy from wherever you're working, Bamboo, you're going to initiate a connection to the servers, and you're going to send the file to the servers. And this is actually supported by Bamboo, because Bamboo has for people. Have people here used Bamboo with remote agents at all? No. Have people used any Jenkins, Hunt, and whatnot with remote agents? Okay. In a build server, quite often you're not going to want to actually run a lot of builds on your build server, because builds and testing and compiling, these are all very CPU intensive operations, and you're going to be limited by whatever hardware you have. So a very popular setup, once you're testing and compiling heavy amounts of code, for example, the Chromium project. Here, we're at Google, so we'll take the Chromium project. I don't know if people here have ever looked at what is needed to build and test Chromium, but it's enormous. It takes about an hour on a fast laptop with an SD just to compile a release version of Chromium, and the unit tests take hours to run. So since the point here is to be building and testing every single release, you're not going to want to limit that to running on one machine. So a lot of continuous integration tools, Bamboo included, have this idea of remote agents, where you can set up one machine as the master, and then you could set up these slave machines that just take commands and they actually do all of the work. Now, why am I bringing this up now? Because with one of the great features that Bamboo has with remote agents is that they work very well over the firewall. And the reason they work really well over the firewall is because Bamboo doesn't need to actually be able to talk to connect to the remote agent servers. What happens is when a remote agent comes up, it initiates a connection to Bamboo. Once that's happened, it keeps the connection open, and now we have an open channel of communication through the firewall. When I talk about artifact push with Bamboo and remote agents, and I'm not an Atlassian engineer, so I can only assume what they were thinking. But once you have that in place, Bamboo could actually use this transport to move the entire artifact over. Now, that's really great and really cool, but it has a downside, especially if you're using a paid product like Atlassian Bamboo, in that Atlassian Bamboo's licensing model is set up that you pay based on how many remote agents you want. Now, if you need a build farm of, let's say, 5 servers, that's fine. But when we're talking about continuous deployment and we have 20 production servers, we don't want to necessarily have to buy a 20 remote agent license of Bamboo just so that we can get through the firewall and deploy through Bamboo. So we're going to have to look for another solution. The other 2 solutions out there are artifact pull. Now, artifact pull is a more popular approach if you're just coming from the normal deployment world. What you're going to do in this case is rather than pushing the code, taking the code out from version control, you're going to take the whatever compiled version or tested or bundled version of the software you have it, and you're going to put it somewhere on Amazon S3 or on an FTP server, and then the production servers or the development server, whatever server is actually doing the deployment, now has some place that's hopefully easier to access with less firewall traversal problems, and can then pull the source from there. Now, the problem with the pull method is that Bamboo out of the box does not support an easy way to get every single build out to this special place that I'm talking about. It is possible, and we're going to get to that on the next slide, but it's not easily done. So this is the point in the presentation where I have a personal request to everyone out there. There is an open issue at Atlassian that will support hosting all the outputs that you get from Bamboo natively on S3. And I personally believe that this will help streamline deployments using Bamboo as a continuous deployment tool, because it combines a way of getting out over the firewall and not needing a license for every single production server you have there. So either now or tomorrow after you download the slides, please go and vote on BAM 11876 so that future versions of Bamboo could be a lot cooler and better. Okay, now since no PowerPoint is is a good presentation unless we have one of these artsy moving things. I want. No, the truth is, 2 hours before the presentation, I was like, okay, I've got too much. I can't come to Google yet, and I'm not going to start another project. So let's see if we can put some quick animation sequence in. So what I want to show here is how that hybrid pull model works. So we start with a Git repository and a Bamboo or a Bamboo slave, something that's actually going to be doing the work. And we take the source files, and Bamboo actually pulls them from the source code repository. Bamboo is then going to turn that into an artifact. Remember, earlier on we said Bamboo can only deploy artifacts, not source code control versions. So it's going to take everything you have, and it's going to put it in, for the sake of this discussion, let's say it's a zip file. It's not really a zip file because it's going to get wherever it's going as an actual set of files. But it's this one single unit that could be deployed later on. Now we have our firewall. Everything so far has been to the left of the firewall, and our production servers, which are going to appear somewhere around here, are to the right of the firewall. So what we're going to do is we are going to push from Bamboo to some third-party storage, like S3. Why do I use S3 as an example? Because S3 is gives you 99.5 nines after the decimal point. So S3, by definition, not necessarily in practice, but by definition, S3 is extremely high availability storage with commodity pricing because chances are your deployment artifacts are not going to weigh that much. So you're paying very little for something that's always going to be up. And it's important that wherever your deployment artifacts are is always up. Because if you find a bug in your code and you need to roll back quickly, you don't want to find out, oh, this is not available, that's not available. You want everything available so that things will go smoothly. So once everything is in the high available storage, the production cluster, which is presumably powered by something like Chef or Puppet or something, okay, is going to be able to pull the artifact from the storage, and then everything will work very nicely. In the meantime, you've got a hack around it. You can either upload your artifacts. Remember, I promised I'd tell you how to get around this. So at the end of every build in Bamboo, you could tell it to upload the artifact. Yeah? All right, I'm finishing up, 2 minutes. You could set up an action that's going to run at the end of the task that'll upload to wherever. The problem there is that now every single version of the software that you've ever built and tested, and if you're using continuous integration, that's going to add up to a lot of versions, is now going to be is going to need to manually upload there, and it's just a place for things to go wrong. Or you can tag in source control at the end of the build and use the first method that I talked about, and then just tell your deployment script to use this particular tag. Okay, summarize. We're finishing up here. So we learned tonight about continuous integration, continuous deployment. I talked about how to set up a local environment powered by Chef and Vagrant and Berkshelf, which are 3 of the coolest pieces of software that I've seen in the last 2 or 3 years. I highly suggest that you all go back to those slides and kind of tinker around with it at home. For the software developers out here, especially the ones who are doing web stuff or stuff that use external servers, your coding and building life will just never be the same. We learned how to run Mocha unit tests from the command line, which we actually did. We integrated Bamboo in a Git repository, in theory, because Bamboo just VirtualBox wouldn't run. And in part 3, we touched on deployment with Bamboo, and we saw how it's possible to do it today, and how I really hope that it'll be a bit more streamlined in the future. Special thanks before I finish to Google for hosting us, to Daniel and the entire team at Wikistrats for making both of these events happen, to Atlassian for the kick-ass software and sending us a Holly. And that's it. Do I have time for a question or two? Yeah? All right, I have time. Any questions? I know we covered a lot in a very small amount of time, and I apologize for that. The slides, you can QR that link. The slides are not up to date yet because like I said before, I changed the slide deck a few minutes before the presentation happened, but they will be ready tomorrow. Questions? No. That either means I did such a good job or that people completely didn't understand. I'm going to just take it for the first. Thanks a lot, and have a great evening.